So when I take row 2 and divide it by 3, and Alyssa, this is where I think we like connected the dots with you a little bit yesterday. You're doing it to all of row 2, the left side and the right side. Yes, if you don't do it to the right side, then that's not going to morph into the right inverse matrix. So leave everything alone in row 1. And this is what I think is kind of most annoying about it, is the number of transformations we have to go through and just rewriting rows. It's just tedious. So 0, 1, 1/3, right? We're dividing 1 by 3, so it's going to get a little sticky at times because you are going to have fractions in there. Another 1/3. 0 divided by 3 is 0. Negative 1 divided by 3 is negative 1/3. And then leave. Okay, do you want me to give you a tip that would require less writing, or do you want me to just take it one step at a time?
Tip less writing.
You can change, like right now I know I just changed row 2. But I know my next move is going to be to try to make this one a 0, right? I need 1, 1, and 1, but I have to get 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, right? So I can adjust row 3 right now. How could I get 4? Keeping in mind, and the reason I can do this at the same time is because I'm not going to use row 2 to do it. I'm going to use row 1. I'm going to take row 3, and I'm going to add 2 times this.
Then you're going to change your 0, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, I don't want to do that.
That's why I would do it.
We can't do that.
Then you can just probably add 1 to the second row. Because then
Let me make sure everyone sees that, because there is definitely a trial and error process here at times, and he foresaw that, thank God, before we got too far into it. If I took row 3 and I added double this, that's great. It would make this a 0. But if I take row 3 and I add double that, I'm going to lose my 0. Does that make sense? So never mind that right now. Let's not touch that. How about this one? Let's change that one to a 0 next. Can I? What's that? Can we just add 2? No. You have to add another row, and you can multiply that other row by something. So we want to add 2. So we could now double this row and add it to that one. Do you follow? You also could have this row and add it together, but I don't like having something. I'd rather multiply by a whole number. So I'm going to take row 1 and I'm going to add double row 2, and that's going to replace my row 1. So rows 2 and 3 are not changing, but I am changing row 1, so I'll start there. So if I look at the first item in row 1, I'm taking that and I'm adding 2 times this number. Right, 1 plus 2 times 0 is 0, so that's just going to be 1 plus 0 is 1. So we didn't mess that up like we were about to if we chose the other method that Andrew pointed out. On the next item, if I take that item from row 1 and I add double this, I get 0. Right, I get negative 2 plus 2. Yep, which will be 0. This one is negative 1 plus 2 times a third, which is 2/3. What's negative 1 plus 2/3? Negative 1/3. That's going to be tougher for some of you if you hate fractions. I mean, no one likes them. I don't like them, but on the 0, we're going to start with 0 and we're going to add double this. So it's 0 plus 2/3, which is just 2/3. On the next one, I'm taking 1 and I'm adding 2 times this. So that's going to stay 1. And on my 0, I'm adding double this, which will be negative 2/3. My other rows are not changing.
If multiply negative 1/3 times negative 1/3, would it be positive 2/3?
I'm not multiplying anything by 1/3. I'm multiplying things by 2. Are you talking about this last item?
Yeah.
So I took the row 1, which was 0, and I added 2 times negative 1/3, which is negative 2/3.
It's negative or positive.
Yep. All right, now this 4, I can use row 2 to do it, right? I essentially want to make this 4, and you can circle that if you want to like focus your eye on what we're trying to change here. I'm going to take that row 3 number, and really I think when you're trying to decide what to do, this technique might help you. This is the number I'm trying to get to be a 0 right now before I move over, right? I want to take column by column. So you really aren't looking at anything else. I can only use row 2 and row 1. What am I going to do to row 3 to get it to be a 0? I'm going to have to subtract 4 times row 2, right? Looking only at those 3 numbers. Does that make sense? You only focus on really the column you're working on to help make that decision. And covering those other things up might help you. I would take 4 and I would have to subtract 4 times the 1. So that's row 3 minus 4 times row 2, and that's going to become our new row 3. Which means row 1 and row 2 are just getting copied over. So do that. And then we have to process this little algorithm we came up with 6 different times for all 6 items in row 3. So starting with the bottom left, that row 3 number, 0, minus 4 times that row 2 number, 0. 0 minus 0 is still 0, which we don't want that to mess up. Once we've accomplished that 1, 0, and 0, we want to make sure that's not changing. On the second number, that row 3 number of 4 minus 4 times that row 2 number of 1, 4 minus 4 gives us the 0 that we wanted. This one's kind of a bummer, but it'll be easy to fix because when you're trying to get 1, so it already was a 1, which was nice, but because we kind of have to move column by column and achieve what we want, sometimes this happens, but again, it'll be a quick fix on the next step. So row 3, which is 1, minus 4 times a third. 4 times a third is 4/3, right? So what is 1 minus 4/3? Negative 1/3. That's 3/3 minus 4/3. Good. Keep moving over. 0 minus 4 times a third is 0 minus 4/3, which is negative 4/3. Negative 2 minus 4 times 0 is still negative 2. And 1 minus 4 times this. Now, minus 4 times this is going to create a double negative. Are you with me there? And you might want to write this. 1 minus 4 times negative 1/3 is going to be 1 plus 4/3, which is going to be 3/3 plus 4/3. That is 7/3.
And you're trying to get them outside of 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, and 0, 0, 1.
So now this is easy to get a 1 because what can I multiply this by? Negative 3, right? Row 3 times negative 3 is just going to become my new row 3. So watch what happens here, because even though fractions came up and they're annoying, this right now is going to clear all those fractions from row 3 anyway, which is nice, and it will kind of, you can have fractions in your final answer, but this, a lot of times this just, for whatever reason, happens where your fractions will just eliminate. So I'm just copying this over. Sorry, I'm going to have to start working up. Okay, so negative 1/3 times negative 3 is 1. Negative 4/3 times negative 3 is just, you make me nervous, negative 3 times negative 4/3. Your 3's cancel, your negatives cancel. It's just 4. Are you good with me there? Negative 2 times negative 3 just becomes 6. And 7/3 times negative 3 becomes negative 7. Not that I like to hear you complain, but the silence is confusing me. Take your headphone out, please. Okay, so I am pretty much there. Because, well, I just need to get these to be zeros. Okay, that is definitely something that I want to do, because rather than taking a row and subtracting whatever times the other row, I can always add 2 rows together, but that's only going to fix one of the problems, because anytime you do an algorithm, it's only going to fix 1 row at a time. So I can take row 1, and he's capitalizing on the fact that these are opposites. Does everybody see that? I can take row 1 and add it together with row 2, but which one is that going to replace? Either or you can choose, but we have to pick one because you can't change 2 rows at a time. Sure, it doesn't really matter. We'll go with row 1. I don't think it matters. We'll see if we run into some trouble. So my row 1 is going to be replaced by adding the 2 rows together. So 1 plus 0 will still be 1. 0 plus, that's going to be trouble. We can't do it. Do you see why?
Yeah.
Okay, can't do it. Now, what if we replace row 2? Nope, we're going to have the same issue here, so we don't want to do that. We're not stuck. We're just going to have to go with the traditional way of doing it. We're going to have to take, let's say we take, we got to think through this. You guys might come up with it fast. I can't take row 1 and add 1 times row 2. You know what I have to do? I have to use row 3 because I have to use these that are both zeros. So I have to use my multiplier on row 3. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take row 1 and I'm going to add 1/3 of row 3. That'll not affect the first 2 numbers because 1/3 times row 3 will still be 0, but 1/3 times 1 will be a positive 1/3, and when I add that to negative 1/3, that'll give me the 0 that I need. Do you follow? That one took more creativity than we would like. All right, so I'm replacing row 1. So 1 plus 1/3 times 0 is still 1. 0 plus 1/3 times 0 is still 0. Negative 1/3 plus 1/3 times 1 is the 0 that we wanted. This is going to get a little bit, I don't know, it depends on how fluent you are with fractions. 2/3 plus 1/3 of 4. What is 1/3 of 4? Don't overthink it. It's 4/3, right? So 2/3 plus 4/3 is 6/3. You with me? Which is the 2 that he keeps saying. I'm just taking them a little more slowly through that. So 1 plus 1/3 of 6. What's 1/3 of 6? 2, right? That one you might just know the 2, or you might change it to 6/3, but 6/3 is 2. So 1 plus 2 gives you 3. And 1/3 of negative 7 is negative 7/3. Negative 2/3 plus negative 7/3 is negative 9/3, which is negative 3. So another situation where, amen, our fractions got eliminated and we're one step away. So, who thinks, other than, well, take a minute, think about how you're going to make this 1/3 a 0. Which is what? Take what row? Take the third row and do what with it? Very good. So we're going to take row 3 and multiply it by negative 1/3 and then do what with that? Row 2. Very good. And that replaces row 2. He wrote that in a little bit of a different order than I did, but it's totally fine. So if I take, well, I'm replacing row 2, so let me just rewrite row 1 and row 3. Okay, so to replace this one, I don't know why mentally I just like to think I'm going to take that number in row 2, 0, and add it to negative 1/3 times 0, which is 0, so that's going to stay 0. I'm going to take this 1 and I'm going to add negative 1/3 times 0, which will still be a 1. And here's where it'll get fun. 1/3, adding it to negative 1/3 times 1. Negative 1/3 times 1 is negative 1/3. 1/3 plus a negative 1/3 is the 0 that we wanted. On the next one, what's negative 1/3 times 4? Negative 4/3 plus 1/3 is negative 3/3, which is negative 1. Negative 1/3 times 6 is negative 2. Add that to the 0. That's negative 2. And negative 7 times negative 1/3 is 7/3. Add 7/3 to negative 1/3, and that gives you 6/3, which is 2. There's our inverse. A inverse equals 2, 3, negative 3, negative 1, negative 2, 2, 4, 6, negative 7. Now, just remember, and I'm not going to show it, but remember what inverses do. The property that an inverse should withhold is that when you take that inverse and multiply it by the original, 2, 3, 0, I don't know why I didn't want to do it because I just can't myself. When you go through your multiplication, you should get the identity matrix. You ready?
1, 3, 4.
2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 1 is 3. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. 7 minus 6 is 1. Then we go across that row and down the next one. 6 minus 6, 0 is 0. Then we go again, 0, negative 3, positive 3, 0. Good? Then we go negative 2, positive 2, 4.
I'm not doing this.
No. Oh, wait, I lied. Okay, I was going to say, wait a minute. We did not make a mistake. Negative 2, negative 2, 4, 0.
I was going to drop this class.
Negative 3, 4, which is 1, 0. Perfect. 0, 2, negative 2. 8, I mean, this so far so good, it's going to work, but 8, 6 is 14, negative 14. 12, negative 12, 0. 0, negative 6, positive 7. Okay. So your homework one is, well, I don't know. I don't want to tell you it's easier than this one because truthfully, I I haven't done it yet, but you're gonna start it right now and you've got 15 minutes to work on it. Clearly, based on what just happened, you should do it on an entirely separate sheet of paper. I know you guys handed in this paper the other day, so if you... Of your what?
Is there a formula for the inverse?
Why, do you still have this in your possession? Yeah, you can. Most people don't. So, right there is your only homework question. So you have 15 minutes to get started. Please feel free to come up at any point in time and check your progress.
Can I just watch this video?
Sure.
You can explain too fast.
I don't think I can. Did you get a little feel for it with what we just did?
Yeah, I know how to do like.
Yeah. So the only thing I can tell you is that we start with that top spot, which is when you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And then you want to find a way to get that to be a 0, which means you're probably going to use a multiple of the 1.
Yeah.
And you want to find a way to get that to be 0. Oh, can I give you one quick piece of advice on this? I think right from the get-go, it might be helpful to switch rows 2 and 3.
Do that?
But you can just switch. Yes.
You can always you can take a row and multiply it by something. I talked about this yesterday. And whoever came in late and I gave them their notes, it's written on that one. But you can take a row and multiply it by something. You can take 2 rows and add them together with one of them being multiplied by something like we did a lot. Or you can switch rows.
So you don't change anything, you just switch it.
Right, you can just swap 2 rows at any point. I think that might be helpful here because this is a 0. I will get the 0 down here, which I will want eventually anyway, and I'll get this to be a -1. So I could almost immediately just worry about getting these zeros, but then I'll just probably have it. I don't know. Sometimes, like it to me, just quickly looking at it, I think that might be helpful. You might find that if, like, once I got into it, I might be like, well, it didn't make a difference, but I tried.